Welcome, Richard. It seems forever since we've spoken, and it's lovely to see you here again today.
Yeah, it's been a while. It
It
has been
has,
a
hasn't
while.
it?
It was, when we last spoke, the sun wasn't out, and it's streaming out this morning, so it has been for a while now.
Marvelous. And yes, my name is Kim Searle. Thank you for joining the Balanced Mind podcast. We've got a real juicy one for you today. We're all about the meeting of hearts and minds, if you like, in business. And our topic today is obviously the chaos that's being wreaked across the world by our American friends. And whilst we don't want to make this a political party broadcast, we do want to look at the impact of what's going on down at grassroots, i.e., you, the business owner. So, Richard, we just talked briefly before we came on, and I said I wanted to share a real story of my own where I'm seeing some similarities going on and how that impacted us within the business and what that meant. And then perhaps we can take it from there, if that's okay. So we've got about half an hour, so it should be good. So it was years ago. It was I used to work for a subsidiary of Motorola, lovely company, one of the best ones I've worked for, real family ethos, even though they were very big. And we were Motorola Telco, so they had embraced a lot of those family values. And then Motorola decided, we're not dealing with the airtime anymore, which is what we were. We had been put in place to sell Motorola phones, and it had branched out. So they decided to sell us off, and we were a bit apprehensive, as with all sales. Who's taking us over? What's it going to mean? Those who were important in the business, i.e., the finance people, shared resource, were moved into headquarters, which actually was just the sixth floor, as we were on the fourth or fifth. So it wasn't massive, but they were moved out of the company and upstairs. And then this other company came in. Now, I'm not going to name them for a variety of reasons, but oh my God, what a cultural 180 degree. They came in, and within weeks, they had sacked 80% of the leadership team. Gone. These guys have been there since the beginning. The company had been going for probably 15 years. They had a wealth of experience even prior to working in this business. And there was no ceremony, there was no redundancy. They got redundancy, but more from a we're just getting rid of you, here's your package type thing. So they could find out on the Friday, they didn't need to come back on Monday. I mean, it was ruthless. And what that started to do, as those of us who've been there, we started to feel unsettled in what we were doing. Who's next? Particularly as they then replaced them with people from the new management structure, the new CEO. He brought in his people from a business over in Guildford, and he brought them in, and they were lording it, shall we say, in the nicest possible way over us, thinking that they were superior. So they were dismissing our processes, trying to break those down, ignore them. Now, Motorola was really hot on credit control and checking people's credit abilities and making sure that they were getting in their debt. They had a really good debt management scheme to get, people paying their bills and whatever. Some of those processes went out the window. So suddenly, some of the really tried and tested processes had gone. The long and the short of it was, apart from the sacking of people who didn't fit in, and a story for another day, I was one of them. I walked. It was, in fact, I'll tell you, I went to a meeting, room of 20 people. I'd given a presentation based on feedback I'd had, and I was told, rubbish, we don't need that. That's not what we're doing. Got the guy I'd referred to tell me what to say, because obviously I wanted to do the right thing for the sales team, stood up and told a different story completely. Yet he told me one story. So that was it. That was my, you're getting out of here. You're not needed. So consequently, what happened was that once I'd gone through that process, I got another job and left. Within 3 years, that company was decimated and had gone bankrupt. Some similarities, perhaps, that we do it our way. it's authoritarian over let's just be, a bit more cautious. It was definitely, whether you're face fitted, because if you weren't saying yes to everything the CEO and his top management team said, you were out. One lady went to a meeting, saw an organization chart that didn't even have her name on anymore. That's how she found out she was going. So this is a really scary time for people who in that business didn't know whether they'd have a job the next day. Eventually, they had to pay for people to stay. Ridiculous, what? But to wrap the company up, they had to pay people to stay. And I never regret leaving, but my gosh, what a toxic environment.
It's a really good analogy, isn't it? And yeah, as you're talking there, I mean, there's lots of sort of moments that I was thinking, yeah, I've experienced that. I know that. And I think when you compare it with the world we live in today, it sort of encapsulates the macro and the micro side of it, if you like. Because on the one hand, in your case, you've got new owners, new leadership team that has come in, and they've come in with a plan, and they're going to implement their plan. And there's not a lot you can do about that. You can't control that. They're going to come in and do it. So they are, yeah. That's the macro. That's the Trump. That's the Putin. That's what we're seeing in the world today.
Mm,
Um, to some extent, whether that plan is ultimately a success or a failure, A, there's not a lot that you can do about that, and B, it's sort of it's probably beyond your timescale because what you also reflected is the other side of it, which is that yes, they have their plan, but which you can't influence, which you can't control, but you can, at your micro level, you can still control what you do. You're still free to go, well, that may work, it may not work. That's entirely, but it's not what I fancy doing. I'm going to go away and do something different.
mm,
And I think that when it's I've pretty much stopped watching the news at the moment because you watch the news, it's like, wow, not in my lifetime have I lived in a world like this. Where it used to be that us Brits, when we got together, we'd start a conversation, we'd talk about the weather and we'd talk about sport, and then we'd move on to something.
yeah.
Now we talk about war in Europe, and we talk about war in the Middle East, and we talk about economic crisis around the world, and we talk about Bond villains and people taking over the planet, and it's just like this is just insane. It's very easy, a bit like me with the news. It's very easy just to disappear into under the bedclothes and go, I'm just going to hope it all goes away. But life has to go on for all of us as individuals, doesn't it? And whilst I guess to an element, we can influence in as much as we can. Obviously, if we're American, we have a vote. We can talk to our MPs. We can put comments out on social media and all the rest of it. But are these the people that's going to listen to that? Doubt it. But
Mm,
we've all got lives to get on with, and in our context, we've all got businesses to run. And
yeah.
whilst we need to be aware of what's going on, I think it's very important that we don't allow it to affect the mindset that we have on our day-to-day lives. It's if we could have amazing businesses, we could have awesome families. Do we? We should be treating them as amazing businesses and awesome families. We shouldn't be
Mm,
allowing what we feel about the planet as a whole to be influencing what we do on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's almost like how do we do that? How do we train ourselves to do that? How do we drive to work with the radio on, listening to all this chaos, and then get into work and go, right, guys, let's have an amazing day. Let's do this.
turn the radio off is the first thing.
Yeah. How do we plan our workload for the next 12 months when by the time we've got to work with, so I'm not even sure the planet's going to be around in 12 months' time. It's a weird one, isn't it?
It's a real challenge one. And I've been talking about the effects of COVID and how, the stress that went on from there. I think a lot of people have been coping, but I think this is going to be a real turning point for some because I thought we'd still be seeing it in 10 years' time. We'll see the effects of COVID 10, 20 years out from now. But right now, this is just exacerbating things and it doesn't help. And one of the things you quite rightly mentioned is this idea that the only person we can truly control is ourselves. And you said about, the only things we can do is worrying about, who we vote. I love the fact that we can vote with our feet. I quit that job because I had got so bad. I didn't like being treated the way I'd been treated. I didn't like the way they'd been treating people I had held and respected and had helped build the company from, 10, 15 people to 250. They were treated with no respect at all. I didn't want to work for an organization like that. Complete conflict of values. So I voted with my feet and got another job. That's going to be a little harder, I guess, with everybody. We can influence those around us. So I think it's really important, you're quite right, that people stop watching the news because it's not helpful. Or if you must watch it only once a day, and then, try and get a balanced view wherever you can. And then you've just got to focus on you. And then if you can feel calmer, more in control of what you're doing, those around you will start to feel calmer and will follow your lead and be more likely to feel like they can take control of something. It's that whole Stephen Covey thing. I think we've talked about it in the past, these circles of influence. And I always talk that it all starts with us
Mm.
and what's going on inside. If we can take control of what those fears are, then we can start to be more practical with it. And then the brain will just go, oh, okay. So one of the things that I would very often say to people who come to see me is, what are you afraid of? What is it you're afraid of? And when you've done it, then what's your plan? Now, it's going to be a moving feast at the moment, but if it helps to quieten down, that's going on over in America, that's going on over in China, that's Ukraine, that's wherever else, Greenland, whatever. If it helps you, then you can start to narrow it down. And if it doesn't, then reach out to somebody who can be there, somebody else who's got the same concerns, or somebody who's a lot more like you, more balanced in your view. I love the fact that you are very balanced in your approach in this. So that's my thoughts. What would you say they could do for themselves?
Um, I, I like what you said about me being balanced. I'm not sure that one or two people agree with you, but I'll take it.
Yeah. Well, you were certainly balanced before I came on. I was
Yeah,
completely one side and that was it. So I
I,
have tried to rein myself in.
I think it works on. I think it's important to be aware. This freedom to make our own decisions, I think, is so important, and it's important to recognise that we have that as individuals. We can concentrate on doing what we believe is right. We can focus on saying the right things, behaving the right way, trying to be the best person we can be, trying to be the best business leader that we can be, trying to be the best client advisor that we can be. That's something that I think we should all pretty much strive for every day. But at the same time, I think it's very important to recognize that the person that we're talking to has those same choices. And one of the things that I believe um, you know, holds accountants back is this: we try and um, we're fearful of the decisions that the other person's going to make, and that influences what we do. So if you take pricing as an example, pricing is accountants, bookkeepers generally will underprice, because they are worried about the person on the other side of the table saying no. One of the things that I will always say is that person is free to say no. They are grown up, they can make their own decisions.
Yeah.
All you can do is present your case, demonstrate your behavior in what you believe to be the right way. That's all you can do. It's then up to the person on the other side of the table to determine what they want to do next. And that is absolutely okay. It's like when you're talking to a possible new client and they turn around and say no, or when a client leaves. We always take these things personally. We say, oh, this is a failure on my part. Well, actually, a lot of the time, it's just them exercising their own freedom of choice.
Yeah.
They've looked at their world and gone, in my world, this is the right thing to do. That is fine. That doesn't have to be a personal thing every time. And I think that's, to be able to go, I think it's very important that we look at ourselves and go, I can control myself, therefore let's focus on that. I can control how I influence others. Let's make sure I'm influencing people as best as I
Exactly.
can.
Definitely.
But ultimately, the person I'm looking to influence has those same choices. So they can choose an outcome which is different to what I wanted, that doesn't mean to say I've got this wrong.
Mm.
And it's when you get all of this chaos that's around us at the moment, it can cloud our judgment because it impacts our moods, doesn't it? It makes us
Oh, that's
argue.
yeah.
Yeah, arguably, you can. Yeah,
Look at
I
the
would.
market.
Well, yeah,
No mood
exactly.
detected there.
Yeah, I would say that I'm a positive person. But if you're just listening to these, if you're thinking about if this is getting inside your head, you can find yourself getting into a negative mood. And I'm like, well, hang on, I'm getting into a negative mood here because of something that I can do absolutely nothing about. So, I'm not being naive and saying let's not worry about it. But what I am saying is it's got nothing to do with how I behave today, what I say today, the plans that I have. I will carry on with those plans until they interject with, Trump or Putin or whatever. And we see that, I mean, as an example, we were chatting to our financial advisor last week. Um, as we do, we talk at least a couple of times a year about our plans for the future and all the rest of it. And it just so happened that this was when the markets were in absolute free fall, and so there was an interjection. There's a point where they crossed. Trump's behaviour was impacting on our pension statement, and so there's a conversation there where Trump comes into the conversation and we're going, okay, well, let's just sit on this for a while. We don't need to do anything with it, but apart from those sort of practical moments, the rest of it, and go, okay, right, well, I'm interested in what's happening. I read what's happening, but it's got nothing to do with the decisions that I make today, with my mood for today, with the people I work with. Because
Mm.
if I allow it to influence those, then actually that's exactly what I am doing. I am allowing Trump to impact on what I'm doing today, and that's not right. That is not right, and that's a failing on my part if I do that. And Trump doesn't know because Trump has never heard of it, has got no idea what I'm to do.
And he doesn't care.
Yeah, so why would I let him or any of these other maniacs, influence on what I'm going to do with my
Mm.
family today, with my clients today, with my team today?
Mm. And I hear you, and it's very difficult when you're on social media. This is not even the news. So social media has been hijacked in many different ways, and we already know that from the previous American elections. But the point is that, you if you go on there, you're hearing it may not even be anybody political. It could be just your friend or whoever who's posting on stuff. And one of the challenges we really face is believing everything we see posted.
Mm,
And one of the things we need to do is take a step back, hold on a moment. Is Do I know that to be true? Do I know that to be a fact? Does that make sense to me? And then look for the balancing of it, because there will always be an alternative view, so that you do not have to scare yourself, because otherwise we are going to be oiking the laptops into the bin with the phones and become disconnected and living in a yurt somewhere in the middle of, I don't know, the forest. So
yeah, well, there's
which,
certain appeal to that.
for a lot of people as well, I can imagine.
But I think what it does, it's all a learning process, isn't it? We now know that we cannot trust, essentially can't trust our own eyes and ears. We can't trust a
Oh,
photograph or a video or a message or an email or what have you. Um, we can't put those back in the box. That's out in the world now, and with AI, we can assume that's just going to get smarter and smarter and clever, and we're going to have to find new ways of how we utilize those things or avoid
mm,
them, and different ways of building our trust. And I think that's a real positive because right now, the best way to build trust with someone is to physically meet them, sit there, talk to them, shake their hand, have a conversation. All the things that we used to do in business and in friendships in the up to the 70s, 80s. That's how we did it then.
yeah.
And I think now that it's not quite throwing the laptop away and disappearing into a
No, I
yurt, but
am being a bit.
I know, but in terms of our behaviour, it's like, okay, well, if this is someone who I want to build a relationship with in whatever way, shape, or form,
Yeah.
I can't just do it like I've been doing it for the last 5 years, 10 years. I need to do it like, in our case, how we used to do it 25, 30 years ago in the next generation, how their parents used to do it, how they, it's it's almost going back to those old-fashioned values. I think one of the reasons why we're seeing such an explosion in coffee shops, is partly because of this, because people want to get back to sitting opposite somebody, having a cup of coffee, ideally having a nice big bit of cake, and just having a human conversation. I think that, that human growth that we're seeing again, I think is actually potentially the savior for us all in all of this.
Yeah.
We've stopped seeing people as humans, and we've stopped, in many cases, we've stopped behaving on the things that humans are really good at. And we're not robots. We're people with emotions and understandings and empathy and all those sort of things. And the more they come to the fore, the more we've got a chance of getting on top of all this chaos.
Excuse me. Yeah, I think you're right. For me, I think this idea of talking to people and building a relationship, which is a form of trust. Let's face it, a
Mm.
relationship is a form of trust. The one person that I would just add on in that is we need to trust ourselves more. Hold on a moment. Does that work for me? Yes or no? Is that, is that the right thing for me? Yes or no? And start to tune in to what's going on because our deeper mind knows the answers. Now, I'm not going to say it's going to be 100% right all the time, but it was interesting you were talking about decisions earlier. And if we can start to trust ourselves with the decisions that we're taking and notice how often we get it right, we will start to find that we can trust more people because there's a lot of defensiveness when you come into a new relationship, isn't it? That's why they talk about know, like, and trust. And we've got to get to know them a bit more. We'll start with yourself, and that trust will come faster, not only for you trusting them, but for them trusting you. So it's an interesting approach.
Well, I mean, the moment you said that no like trust, immediately I thought, yes, and that has to start with ourselves, doesn't it? We've got to start liking ourselves a bit better.
Yeah,
We've got to know ourselves a bit better, understand ourselves a bit better. And I think out of that, you can build the trust. Again, social media has a way of knocking people down.
yeah,
We know it's a big issue with younger generations and what have you. And it's just like, no, just see yourself. In many cases, just see yourself how other people see you. Because you're not as bad as you think. And
definitely.
it's it fascinates me the way that in all of this digital transformation and the way that the world is moving technically, that I think we are starting to realize the power of being human. And I think that is so important now that that we all. It sounds very trite to say, be the best version of yourself, but I'm not talking about the sort of best versions of yourself that we see pushed out on social media and let's all get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go for a 10-mile run and all. It's just like, just be someone who you are contented with. And I think one of the advantage of getting older is that you're better at doing that, because your priorities change, don't they, and these sort of things. And it would be, I think what we need to do is to help those around us, our family, our teams, our clients, the people who we interact with, just to help them to um, recognize their positives, their good points, so that they can become more confident that they are a good version of themselves. We've got to stop benchmarking ourselves against things that, let's face it, most things on social media are completely artificial, and yet we benchmark ourselves against them, and it's just a bad idea.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. And I was going to say something there about what you were talking about. So, but it's gone, so it's irrelevant. But I think you're right. The more that I mean, there was a quote, and I can't quote it because I can't remember, but the essence of it was the only person that you should be comparing yourself to is you yesterday.
Mm.
That's
Yeah,
the only competition you're in is that with yourself.
I like that.
Yeah, I'll have to find the actual quote itself, but it's true, isn't it? I listened to a webinar on stress. I work with stress, as you know, but it's always good to hear other people talking about it. And this lady came on, and she was a coach for the Olympic teams, and she was talking about how they are stressed, but it's good stress, it's acute stress, it's short term, but they still get it and they've still got to manage it and they've still got to process it. And that she would help them, with a number of different things which we all know of that help us work through it. But what I liked about that is you have to be self-aware to do it. Athletes, sports people, those who are in that sort of sphere are really self-aware. And if you can be really in fact, I'm almost thinking that's where I need to be focusing a little bit more. I say it all starts with you, it doesn't really mean much, but being self-aware of what's going on for you. So when you're tuning into social media or you're looking at the news or you're dealing with, an equivalent client or supplier, be self-aware what's going on. Because
Mm.
when you start working there, you do start to have a ripple effect, if you like, with those around you. The person you're struggling with, they will either fade, or there'll be a big blow up and they'll go, or you'll just be like, I'm ready, just let them go. You know, the sports person who didn't do so well yesterday, what happened? How did that go? I haven't had enough water, I haven't drank enough, eaten enough protein. Change that for today. Oh, what's the difference? And on you go. This level of self-awareness may sound a little bit too much, but it's vital to make sure that what you're doing is you're tuning into yourself, you're trusting what's going on, you're building on that, you're knowing what's going on in your world, not what's going in the world elsewhere, like you say earlier, where you can't do anything. Start with yourself. All
I
start
was
with you, is my current.
watch I was watching the culmination of the US Masters last night, and
Oh, till
Rory
1 o'clock in the
McIlroy
morning,
and
apparently.
yeah, and Justin Rose going head to head, and you watch that, and they know that they've got a massive worldwide audience. They've got something which is technically they've got to be perfect. Yeah, they've had good and bad shots within the last hour. In Rory's case, this is an opportunity to write history. You know,
Mm.
Justin Rose, it's an opportunity for a massive win for him. And you look at the pressure they are under, and you go, how do you even pick the club up, let alone perform? How do you just get beyond that pressure and that tension and that fear and then okay, there's a huge amount of experience there. There's a huge amount of practice, and many years of learning techniques and getting their systems and processes right.
Exactly.
But then you've got the human bit about I've just got to now believe in myself. I've got to believe that all of that means something, that I can do this. And,
Mm.
and you watch it, and part of you goes just wow, But another part of me is like they're people like us. Yeah, we can do our equivalent of those sort of things if we believe in ourselves. If we put in the hard work and the commitment that they've put in. This doesn't happen just by raw talent. This happens because they want it to happen and they're prepared to do that. And I think, this example of if you take Rory McIlroy last night, Justin Rose is eating into his lead and eating into his lead and eating into his lead, and he's got to shut it out because he can't play Justin Rose's shots. And all the rest of them who are behind him, he can't play their shots. He can see what's happening on the scoreboard, but
Mm.
he's got to go right. I need to be aware of that, but I've got to shut that out and I've got to focus on what I do because ultimately, all I can do is get as low a score as possible. It's up to the rest of them what they do, and I think we've got to bring that mentality into our lives. Ultimately, I've got to focus on what's the best I can do. It's then up to the rest of the world what they do. I think that's how
Mm.
we sort of bring that control back in.
And I love that actually, as you were talking. And sport is obviously a great place to be
Mm.
using analogies like that. Because, when you see that Trump's doing one thing and then he's changing his mind, and then, he's talking about, laying people off and then rehiring them because that wasn't right. And it makes me die where they keep talking about trillions of dollars they've saved.
Yeah, well,
Okay, whatever. Get an accountant in there. That would be interesting.
it would, wouldn't it?
But for me, I think the key thing here is if we just focus, like you've just said, on the things that you've trained for a long time and keep doing that, this good will out.
Mm.
I'm not saying it won't be impacted in some way, maybe some good way, we don't know. I've always wondered about the relationship we've had with America. America's always been in charge. We owed them money from World War II, and they only came in because they were threatened. So, and it's right. I mean, you don't want to get involved in other people's wars, let's be honest. But we owed them money, and I think we only finished paying them in about 2015 for the Second World War. I don't know how we got on with the others, but hey, so there was a big debt there. And I think America has got a big debt, so that I understand what Trump's trying to do in terms of bring money in. So he's doing what we're suggesting. He's bringing his focus into America. MAGA, I think they call it, don't they?
Yeah.
Make America Great Again. So I get that, but we can't do anything. We're not Americans. But it's amazing how much the symbiotic relationship has had a global effect.
Mm.
But again, if we can just bring that in to focus on what we do, we have to leave it to our leaders to do what they're going to do. And we, hope that they're going to do the right thing or influence them, as you say. But just bring that focus in, focus on what you're doing, because you'll ride that storm. There will be other storms. I think we've talked about those. We'll have other storms, and it's just keep doing what you're doing, keep calm and carry on.
Yeah, and just deal with what's in front of you. We're taught to plan, and I'm not for one moment saying that we shouldn't plan, but in a sense, whatever plan you do in the world we live in today, whether it be in our, just in the immediate circle around us, or whether it be on a global stage, whatever plan you come up with, it's going to change. Something's going to happen tomorrow that will impact that plan.
Yeah.
If you go in with the view, okay, on the one hand, I need a plan because plan enables me to make decisions, but equally, you have to accept that chaos rules. You're going to have a plan for tomorrow morning. You're going to come in, and a client's going to call at 10 o'clock and want something entirely different. At least you have a plan in the first place, so you knew that. You've got your priorities sorted and all the rest of it, and that so therefore, when the client calls, you already know what playing field you're on. But equally, don't beat yourself up then because you've then got to change your plan because this will happen every day. Chaos happens around us all the time. It's just a matter of scale. And just to accept that part of I mean, I always say to people now, don't plan the night before. Plan the next morning because you minimise that gap. Then you
A lot
reduce
can
the
happen
opportunity.
overnight, can't it?
Well, quite.
Hello.
So
Yeah.
yeah, the long you all know, the longer term you plan, the more likely it's going to get disrupted.
Mm.
But just accept, in a sense, embrace that. One of the skills that we can develop is when things don't go to plan.
Yeah.
I embrace that. I'll deal with it. That's part of my skill set to go, okay, well, that's not, we need to change things. That's life.
Mm.
We'd love things to go to plan all the time, but they don't. And so let's embrace that aspect again of being human. We're not robots. We don't have to follow flow charts. We can do things that are just we can do them on a whim. We can go for a gamble. We can go for a gut feel. All those sort of things. That's what makes us human, and that's what sets us aside. We don't have to. If we're going to compete with a robot will always win on their rules because they're faster, quicker. They just do it quicker than we do.
And I like the
But
fact that you say their rules. They're not our
yeah,
rules.
no. So let's flip it around to our rules. Our rules is, I'm not going to do that. That's why when the robot plays a human at chess, invariably the human wins because they do things that the robot just never saw coming, no matter how well programmed it is. And that's what we're going to do. That's life. Let's just get into it and get on with
Mm.
it.
And maybe that's the thing we need to understand how to do that, because that's quite a big thing. But that's not for today. Um, uh, yeah, maybe that's the law of unintended consequences and what to do.
Yeah, that would be a good one to do actually.
Yeah, I think so. Look, thank you so much. And I really appreciate your time. I think it was we could have made it very political, but that would not have necessarily been as helpful for our audience as the things that we've covered. We've covered sport, we've covered a real life example. So we've touched in on the things that we think are the best way forward. Keep calm, carry on. Thank you so much, Richard. Take care.
Thank you.